And hello everyone, welcome back to your Meteor tutorial. Today we'll be working with adding accounts in our application because currently everyone can just use everything and we do not necessarily want that. So let's get started. I think I would rather stop this task from running and then we can just install everything. So we can say Meteor, add, and then account password. And this basically enables our username and password authentication we have right out of the box with Meteor. And this will allow us to create a login system where everyone has their account and on their account their tasks. And then they can log into their account using their password, which we're going to encrypt with bcrypt. Now while we're waiting for this, there would be nothing wrong with continuing with the program. We'll just wait for this to install. So we want to actually go to the server now because we're going to work with server-side things, such as adding the ability to do username and passwords. So we can go to main.js and we can just bring this down right here. And there it's done as well. Next up, we want to say Meteor npm install save bcrypt, and this will just install bcrypt. And if whenever you want to use npm with Meteor, you have to say Meteor and then npm. Instead of just saying npm install, you have to say Meteor npm install. And with that, we can just press enter and it can install bcrypt. And this will just allow us to encrypt our passwords. And here back at main.js, we can just shrink this down a bit. And now here we can say import, and we want accounts from, and we can say Meteor / account base. And this will allow us to work with accounts. So when the server starts up, we need to check if there is already a username and password because we want to add a default username and password. This could be the admin username and admin password even. This is just so we have at least an account to test our things on. So I'm going to create two constants, one called seed username, and this will be the default username given to the server at startup. So if this username does not exist, it will create a new user with that username. And we can make it equal to, I'm going to call it user. Cool, and you can copy that, and instead of seed username, we can say seed password. And in this case, I'm just going to make the password an easy password. And now we have a username and password. Now in startup, we can go up here and say if, and then not account dot find user by username and seed username. So what this basically does is it goes into our database and it tries to find an account with the username of user, because in this case our seed username is user. We can also do this for emails because Meteor has inbuilt email support. So if you would rather use emails or even both, then you can say accounts.find user by email instead. But this will just try and find the user. And in this case, if it cannot find that user, it means that user does not exist. And we need to recreate the account. We can then say accounts.create user. And this is just the basic way to create a user. We pass in an object inside of here, where we can specify the username. And in this case, I'm just going to make it seed username and the password of seed password. And now we have specified a username and password, which we're going to add into our database if it doesn't exist. And by default, Meteor should also encrypt this password right here, because we installed bcrypt in order for it to do so. So we won't have to worry about encrypting it ourselves. Next up, we can start working on the login form. So you can go to main.css and we can just get all the login things here. If you don't have the CSS, the link to the GitHub would be in the description below. We can save this, and now we should have design for the login form. We're going to start up our Meteor app again. And this will not only create the user, but also allow us to now see how our login form will look. I'm going to close main.css. And here in UI, I'm going to say new file, and I'm going to call it loginform.jsx. And then we can create a basic React component called login form. Perfect. So just so we can actually see what's happening here, I'm going to go right here at app and I'm going to say login form, just so we can see how it looks. We also need to import login form, so we can go up here and we can just copy and paste this and change this to login form. And now once everything has started up here, we should see the change here. Anyhow, we can go back to loginform.jsx and we can continue to work from here. Now we want to also import use state up here. So use state. And this is so we can also get the data from the form and pass it in later. And we also want to import Meteor. So import Meteor from and Meteor/Meteor. So inside of the use state, we want to save the username and password that they enter into the form. So we can create a use state. And this use state can hold the username and set username, which by default would be nothing. But if you want to have a default username, then this would be a great place to set it. And then for the password, it would be the same, but just password and set password. And here our app reloaded, and there's hello world. And hello world was coming from here. Then here in this return, we can change this div into a form. And we can give it a class name of login form. Perfect. Now here we can replace that h1 with a label that says username. And here we can also specify username. And then we can also get an input here of type text. And again, this right here is just an example of Emmet, VS Code's autocompletion, where this input will be changed into an element and this text would be the type it has. We can press enter, and as you can see, we get input and then it's typed. Then right here we can say placeholder, and this should be username. So the user can just also know that this should be the username and not just from the label. We can also give it a name of username and a required, because they do have to enter this in order to continue. We also give it an onChange, and this onChange will have to change this username right there. We can take an E, and E can set username to e.target.value. And E is just event. So we take an event and then we set the event, or we set this username to the event's target, which is this input right here, and its value, which would be the username. Now I can copy this, and we can do the same for password. Then right here we can say password, and then everywhere here we can say password, and then instead of set username we can say set password, and now we will have a password input as well. And after that we just want a submit button. So we're going to create a button of type submit, and we can just say log in. We won't be covering how to do a sign-up form, but if you do want to do a sign-up form, it will be basically exactly the same as this login form, but it will use this create user method right here once they press on sign up. But for right now, we will be fine with just a login form. Save that and you should see your login button right there. Now just for some extra styling, we can create a div here. And this div will just allow the CSS to apply the styling. Do that. And now the styling should look a lot better, as you can see here. Perfect, but now we cannot really submit any of our changes here. Because currently, if we want to log in, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to do nothing. Even if we did fill out this. So what we can do is we can create it on submit. So right here, inside of the login form, we can create a function. And this function can be called submit, which takes in e for event. Then you can say e.prevent default, and this is just so we can prevent the page from reloading. Because it's going to refresh in order to send the data to a different page. But in React, we basically have a one-page application, so we don't want the data to be sent to a different page. And in here we can just say Meteor dot login with password, and this will allow the user to log in with their password. It's built into Meteor. It will do all of the login stuff for you, such as checking the password by encrypting it and seeing if it matches the password in the database, as well as finding the username and all of that. So in here we can just pass the username and the password, and we get the username and password from here. And boom, now they should be able to log in. Alright, so now let's apply this to this form right here by saying on submit, it should call submit. And there should be an equal right there. And these should be squiggly brackets. Save this, and now we should be able to try and log in. So let's put in a random username and a random password in here and see what happens. Well, currently nothing happens, but I'm pretty sure if we were to open up our console, then let's see here. Exception in delivering result of invoking login. That is because we cannot log in with credentials we don't have. So you can possibly check if this login worked. If it didn't work, you can give them an error message and say username or password is incorrect. Anyhow, so let's put user here, and let's put password in here. Now if you try and log in, then we could just assume it did work because we can't currently see if it did. Alright, so let's actually implement this the way it should be, and then we can actually see if it really does work. So right here inside of app, we want to create another use tracker. So I'm going to say const user is equal to use tracker, and here we can just pass in our function, and we can say meteor.user. So it will track the Meteor current user. We also need to make sure Meteor is passed in, which it is not. So let's go here and import Meteor. And there we go. Now we have Meteor being imported as well. Now this user here will basically allow us to check if the user is logged in. And we want to allow the user to see this if they are logged in. So we can just go down here And instead of main, we can wrap all of this inside of a React fragment, which is just like an empty div. So everything inside of main can be then put inside of a fragment. And in here we can say, if user, then, and we want to pass in all of this. So if there is a user currently logged in, then they can see their task form. Else, we want to show them the login form because they need to log in first. So right here with else, we can just pass in the login form. And we should be able to save that and see we are logged in because we logged in before. So let's go to our database. And this is optional, but I want to remove all of the data we currently have here. Of course, we could probably just click on all of these X's here and it will do the same thing, but I also want to show you the user accounts. So once you open up your database viewer, you should see a users table here now. And as you can see, my username is user, and here in services, we can see our password, which is encrypted with bcrypt. And this is all done in the background by Meteor. Now I can delete tasks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete them from here. Because now no tasks are available anymore. And in here, inside of our main.js or server, we want to add the user. And then we want to add the task to the specific user. So we can go here and say const user is equal to accounts dot find user by username. And we can pass in the seed username. And now we want to pass in all of these default values. We want to pass them into this user's account. So to do that, here at this for each, we can then go here and get the task. And we can go to insert task. And we can pass in the task and the user. Then up here at insert task, we want to pass in the user. And here where it says insert, we can then just maybe to make it a bit easier to read, we can split it up like this. And we can say user ID, and we can make that equal to the user dot underscore ID. And this here is built in by Meteor. So when we access the user from this right here, it allows us to access their ID as well. And we can just say user dot underscore ID. And we can also do a created at. And this is just so we can better sort our things from the start, because currently we don't have any created ads for these default values. And we can just say this is new date. Next up, we only need to display the tasks to its owner. So nobody else should be able to just use the tasks. So back in app.jsx, we can scroll up until we find this hide completed filter. Then underneath it, we want to create a user filter. So const user filter should be equal to user. So if the user was found, then we can just go user ID and then user dot underscore ID. And also we can just get an empty value here. So if the user was found, then we'll set the user ID equal to the ID of the user we found. Otherwise, there was no user found, so we don't need an ID since we won't be displaying their tasks. We'll just keep it empty. Then here instead of tasks, it's this use tracker. We can wrap this inside of these brackets. And we can go here and just say return. And we can just remove that there. And right here, we can just add that bracket there to close it off here. Now above all of that, we want to check if not user. So if the user was not found, then we just want to return an empty array because we don't want to give them any tasks just yet. Otherwise, it will be perfectly fine to just return the normal things. Same here with pending tasks count. So right here at the use tracker, we want to wrap all of this inside of curly brackets. And we can just return this here. And then above it, we can yet again check if there is a user. So if the user is actually logged in. If they are not logged in, then we can just return 0 because they don't have any tasks, so it's just 0. Now I want to go back to the task form, which is right here. And here where it says this insert here, we also need to add the user ID. So we're going to pass in the user from now on here as well, so user. And in here we can just say user ID is then equal to the user._ID. And then next up, to test this and as well for the user, we need to add a logout button. So we can go back to app.jsx and we can create a logout function. So we can create a quick function, so const login, and we can just do this, and that should meteor.logout. And this should be logout, not login. So meteor.logout is a built-in Meteor function to log the user out. So if they have an account and they click on whichever button that calls this, it will log them out. So then right here, once the user is found and inside of this fragment, we can create a div with the username of user. And in this div, we can just say user.username. And here we can say onClick is equal to logout. Now, whatever you put in here is your choice. So if you just want the username to appear here, and then if they click on this, they will be logged out, then you can. Although I like to do this and just say log out, just to make it obvious to the user that if they click here, they're going to be logged out. Click on that, and as you can see, we got logged out. Now we can actually check if this login works. So user, and also password. And let's try and log in. And there we go. We are logged in with our default tasks given to us. So to add styling for this, we can go back to our main.css. And here at this user, we can just uncomment that. And if you don't have it, you can just go to GitHub and get that piece of code. And that should allow this to just look so much better, as you can see here. To indicate that you can actually click on this, I would actually also add here a cursor and pointer. And this will just indicate to the user that, hey, they can click here, because their cursor will now be a pointer. And that is the basic login and logout procedure. So we can click here to log out, and that will log us out, and then we can insert our username, insert our password, and because we have Meteor, we can securely send all of these details to the backend and say login, and here we go. In the next video, we'll be doing some refactoring, removing some insecure code, making our code more stable and more secure. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all again in the next Meteor tutorial.